Ich freue mich sehr, begrüßen zu dürfen zur Panel-Diskussion Holger Lenz aus den USA als DSpace Program Coordinator. Holger wird die Panel-Diskussion moderieren. Ich freue mich auch sehr, Beate Rajski, die gerade den Vortrag mit mir gehalten hat, dass sie sich wagt, auf die Bühne zu setzen und Fragen zu beantworten und die Community unterstützt. And I'm switching to English now, and the following discussion will be in English, and I'm very happy to have with us Bram Luyten from Atmire. Thank you for coming, Bram. And also very important, Andrea Bollini from PostScience, so one of the persons on this panel that knows DSpace-CRIS for sure, the best of, I think, everybody all over the world, as he was deeply involved in developing it.
Die Richtung ist entmutet. Jetzt ist noch gemutet. Gut.
Ja, ja, damit die sich dann auch bei den Fragen einloggen können. Einfach slido.com, einfach mal kurz. Genau, und dann der Code. Einfach nur ziehen die Zeile drunter, würde ich auf den Code schreiben, dann 132 6184. Genau, und ich erkläre gleich nochmal, wie das funktioniert dann. Super, danke dir.
Das ist die Möglichkeit, Fragen einzureichen. Und ich sehe gerade, dass das natürlich dann auch eine Möglichkeit ist für Personen, die am Livestream teilnehmen, Fragen einzureichen.
Can you hear me? Yes, you can. That is good. Very good. Okay, so let's get started with our panel discussion. I'm going to sit here in the middle, and I would like to just welcome everyone to our panel discussion. We look forward to our discussion, and just to mention it again, we'll be doing this in English. We have an international audience and international panelists with us, and I'll welcome them in a minute. And just for, again, the housekeeping here, if you go to slido.com, you will see a field in the center of the page where you can say join. And when you enter the number that you see here on the screen, this should take you to the Praxistreffen Q&A, where you are then able to enter your questions. I will see the questions here on my iPad as you enter them. So for all of those who are virtually or connected, feel free to also enter your questions. Please also feel free to enter them in German or in English, whatever you prefer. You do have a 160 character limit, so you have to be economical when you enter your questions. Feel free to enter 2 questions, 3 questions, however many you want to. Just for housekeeping, briefly. Then I would like to start by welcoming the participants. And I'll just briefly introduce them again and review some of the expertise that they bring along, both in terms of DSpace and DSpace-CRIS, just to highlight the fact that we have such a highly expert panel here with us. So I would like to welcome Beate Rajski, who is the director of the Library of Hamburg University of Technology since 2021. As we heard earlier, she's one of the 2 chairs of the DSpace-Konsortium Deutschland. She's also representing the DSpace-Konsortium Deutschland on the DSpace Leadership Group. And at the Hamburg University of Technology, she has worked with DSpace since 2015 and with DSpace-CRIS since 2017. So welcome, Beate. Of course, you all also know Pascal Becker. I don't think there's anyone who doesn't know him yet here in this room. So he's the other chair of the DSpace-Konsortium Deutschland. He is a member of the DSpace Leadership Group and the DSpace Steering Group. He's also a DSpace Committer, and he serves on the DSpace and DSpace-CRIS Strategic Planning Group. And I'll talk a little bit more about that group in just a minute. So welcome, Pascal. Then I will continue with Andrea Bollini, who is the CTO and Deputy COO of Force Science. He's also a member of the Leadership Group and the Steering Group and a committer. He serves on the DSpace and DSpace-CRIS Strategy and Technology Planning Group. And Andrea has been contributing to DSpace for a long time. He has started since 2004. He is contributing since DSpace 1.2. So he's been a long-time contributor. He became a committer a few months after starting, and he is one of the longest active committers in the DSpace community. In 2010, he created DSpace-CRIS to respond to the needs of the University of Hong Kong. So we want to also welcome Andrea. And then we're happy to have Bram Luyten from Atmire with us. He's a co-founder of Atmire, and he has been offering DSpace services since 2006. And he's also a DSpace committer and previously served as the co-chair of DCAT. So welcome, Bram. Nice to have you. So, the DSpace and DSpace-CRIS merger discussion can be a little bit of the elephant in the room. What's going on? What's happening? Why are we even talking about this? I'm just going to give a little bit of background, and Beate already talked about it a minute ago. But just for your context, for you to know why we're discussing this and why we're here as a panel, really, is that 15 years ago, DSpace-CRIS, as we just said, was created as an open source extension of DSpace to meet the needs of a current research information system. And this was quite possibly the first open source CRIS system of this type. When DSpace 7, we go a little bit further in history, when DSpace 7 was released in August of 2021, it now included configurable entities, which now was a major feature in the DSpace platform. And this really brought the two platforms closer together. And since then, we have been seeing an overlap of use cases of DSpace and DSpace-CRIS. And so as we've been sort of discussing this in the community, in the governance groups, we've realized this might be the time to think about a merger of DSpace and DSpace-CRIS and to discuss it. So what happened is that in October 2024, Maureen Walsh, who is the DSpace Leadership and Steering Chair, she informed the community of the intent to investigate a possible merger of DSpace and DSpace-CRIS. This was last year in October. And we then started to form two working groups. One of them is a strategic working group, which is tasked to investigate how can we bring the communities closer together or combine the communities and merge them together. The other one is a technology planning group, and that group is tasked with investigating how we can combine the code bases and how we can combine the platforms together. These two groups started their work about a month and a half ago. We've had a few meetings, but this is where we are today with this topic. And that's the reason why we're here. We want to provide you with the opportunity to ask questions about this merger. And as I said, we have an expert panel here with us. So we're going to get started now. I'm going to ask the first question and let each panelist answer that question. And then feel free to use both our Slido questions or ask questions straight from here from the room. So my first question that I would like to ask the panelists is, what do you see is the greatest benefit of a potential merger? And if it's okay, we're going to start with Beate, and then we're going to go around the room for the...
What is the greatest potential? First of all, I just say I am a DSpace user. I'm using DSpace-CRIS, but for me, it's the community. And when I see we have two companies and two flavors of DSpace, and this is what we wanted to get rid of when we had the two UIs, JSP UI and XML UI. So I don't think our vulnerable community has the resources to go for two flavors. So it's really something we should combine. The other thing is, I've been in the DSpace community for quite some time, and I'm so much used to the features in DSpace-CRIS, the entities, the functions around it. And when I talk to others and they say, we wish this for DSpace, and I'm like, it's already there. I think there's so many functions which would enhance DSpace a lot. Those are the 2 points I'd like to see as reasons for a merger.
I became a DSpace committer, I think, in 2014. And for many years, I wanted to go to the Open Repository, and the Open Repositories in Dublin was the first one I was able to attend. And if I remember correctly, this was 2016. And I went to that meeting, and before I even got my badge and being registered, people came to me and welcomed me really friendly, and I felt immediately at home. And it was surprising to me because we were just chatting via ASCII chat without video calls or anything at the time. And it felt like being at home and being surrounded by friends. And at that meeting, almost 9 years ago, we already talked, I think, over an hour about a potential merger of DSpace and DSpace-CRIS. And since then, the question is coming up again and again and again. And I'm not saying that we should do the merger just to get rid of this question, but I wanted to point out that so many people in the community are raising this question because it looks so obvious. We are one community. All DSpace-CRIS users are using the DSpace code. It's included in DSpace-CRIS, but they have more features, and they have features that also the DSpace users are looking for and would like to have. There are reasons why this developed like this and why it became like this, and there are good reasons why it was done like this the years ago. But for me, now it's time to bring this back together. And as Beate just said, the UIs, XML, JSP UI, were one of the examples where we had a comparable situation, and we still not overcame it because now the situation are not the UIs, now the situation is the question of DSpace or DSpace-CRIS. And that, while they are pretty close, it's still a lot of work to bring features from one to the other. And that's something we must stop and must reunite our resources and develop together on one common software base.
Yeah, let me start saying the merger is the great opportunity for the DSpace and DSpace-CRIS community, for both community that we see over the last years, in my opinion. From the DSpace perspective, I guess that is quite obvious that they will immediately gain access to a lot of features that request took years to be implemented, to be developed, to be refined, look into the expertise and the usage of this feature in real world from many, many institutions. And you need to pay attention to the fact that we are talking about really general feature. The DSpace-CRIS name could wrongly suggest that we are talking about some features that are tailored to a specific domain, but this is not the reality. What we are talking about are features that aims to empower the concept of configurable entities that has been introduced in DSpace, that make these configurable entities more than just a promise of flexibility, but the reality and something that you can really use. From the perspective of the DSpace-CRIS user, it's also very beneficial because we will have a larger use base. That means discover issue, in identifying possible improvement, improved quality of the software much faster than before. And we will save a lot of community resources, avoid duplication of effort. We don't need to backport feature from DSpace-CRIS to DSpace time by time, one by one, that is really costly. Or we don't need to spend time to align DSpace-CRIS code base with DSpace. All of that subtract resources but to both DSpace and DSpace-CRIS. And just to stress this concept, I need to highlight the data from the Lyrasis community report, from the last community report. If you look to the contribution of all the provider, for science donate thousands of hours to DSpace, and of course we are the leading contributor of DSpace-CRIS. Most of work of DSpace-CRIS come from us. So we are talking about thousands, several thousands of hours all the year that are donated by Foresight. And now we split this contribution across two different projects. what we could do if we can focus just on a single project. How better could be the final DSpace, how much aligned with the need of a modern repository, more aligned with the competitor. If you look to the market, to the landscape of the competitor, we need to be honest and say that our competitor, the DSpace competitor, are much more aligned to the feature provided by DSpace-CRIS than the feature provided right now by DSpace. So this is an opportunity that we need to take now.
Okay, thank you very much. As the last panelist, it is quite a challenge to come up with something original that hasn't been said by the four, and I agree with everything that's been said so far. But what I may add is that there's a very big opportunity here to really think about the fundamental question of what is DSpace aim to be in the coming 10 years going forward? What are we today? If you look at the snapshot of, okay, what features are there, what are people using it for, it almost seems like serendipitous consequence of a whole bunch of contributions or decisions by individuals that were done over the years. It was not that 10 years ago somebody had a grand scheme and a grand vision and that we executed some kind of roadmap, well, maybe on paper, yes, but where we are today with DSpace is just a magnificent, fantastic result of everybody's contributions and opinion of what should be in the software and what can be useful. And I remember back years ago when the community was much smaller, when also that governance that we were talking about before was much lighter. Being a committer was just like, as the committer, you just had the superpower to say, okay, click, this goes in, and it's like a decision of a minute, and these things happened. And that was very positive for like the speed at which things were done. But looking back to it, and especially some of the challenges we've had with some of the features, you look back at some of that and you think like, okay, maybe a little bit more governance, a little bit more vision around that might make sense. Because indeed, I agree, the promise of, yes, let's get all of these features in, that's fantastic. But what if one feature or one particular idea is conflicting with another feature or a requirement of something else? That is like the real risk or the real challenge, where just in these groups, the discussion or the questions from you today that we all have the opportunity to shape the vision of DSpace in the future with a completely transparent community-based process, which in my opinion puts us way ahead of the commercial providers like, I don't know, Pure or Digital Commons, who can just all decide that within the four walls of their own corporations. Okay, it's not the easiest road, but I think this road in terms of sustainability and making sure that we still can use this software 10 years from now, I think what we're gonna do is just the best bet for everybody.
Thank you all very much for answering that question. So now we'll open it up to the audience. I already have 10 questions here on Slido. So I'm going to start with those, since I don't also see any hands right now. The other thing I forgot to mention is you can upvote questions on Slido. So if there's a question that's already been asked, you can give it a little thumbs up, and that way it moves it further up in the hierarchy, so to speak. So I'm going to start with the one that has been upvoted the most. The first question that I have here is, how can the academic institutions, both large and small university libraries, effectively plan their IT strategies and allocate resources given the uncertainty? Pascal?
That is a question that I find very important, very simple to answer. We all knew that migration to DSpace 7 was very painful and very hard. And everybody in the community does not want to go through such a process again. We are all aware of that. We are putting a lot of ideas and discussions into that merger to see how can we come to a product that we can migrate DSpace as well as DSpace-CRIS users onto easily. And I'm always being told, oh, that will be the migration to a version where the software base is merged will be as hard as DSpace 7. And I always say, no, I don't think so, because you must understand what happened. The merge of DSpace 7 was so hard because we introduced an entirely new user interface, an entirely new technology stack. DSpace and DSpace-CRIS are aligned in the technology stack today. There are differences between the features, but not between the general technology that's used for the backend or for the front end. So what I expect from a migration to a merged code base is that it will be like any other major release of DSpace or DSpace-CRIS that brings new feature to you. Yes, you have to take a look if the features you used in the past are being marked as deprecated, are being changed. You should take a look on the new features that exist, if they're interesting for you, if you want to use them, if they can help you. But it's for sure not a release where you will have to go through regenerating your whole front end in an entirely different programming language than before. So to bring this down, how can you manage your resources, plan your resources in this field of uncertainty? I think the uncertainty is much less than you expect if you're looking onto this like I described it. And it's getting much better understandable what will need to be done. I can't say for now how this will look exactly because we are still discussing that. But I can assure you that we are all aware that nobody wants to go through another large migration like the one to DSpace 7. They're doing all the best to avoid this, and that the path we will have to go, where we are coming from and where we would like to go to, looks totally different, like the migration from 5 or 6 to 7.
Thank you. Any other comments on that?
I wish I could say that, yeah, once we're at the end of this trajectory, all of the uncertainty will be gone, but that's just, in my experience, not the case. Uncertainty for roadmaps, for technology, it's just always going to be there. And the only advice that I could give is just to be really the steward and the guardian of your requirements. Not only the requirements that your systems are already perfectly serving today, because you have to guard and protect those, but also when stakeholders walk up to you and they give you new requirements, to be really the responsible gatekeeper of saying, yes, this is something we will take into scope of our, not only our software, but just the whole service, the service around it. So if you can manage that responsibly and keep your North Star or your focus on, these are the most important things we want to do for our stakeholders in 3 months' time, in 6 months' time, and these we're only going to discuss our 1 or 2 years. You just need to, you've all been doing this, but just you need to live with the fact that when you need to make decisions, you need to make those decisions based on the software and the information that is available to you at that point. Sometimes you realize later that maybe you went wrong, but then you get the opportunity to decide again, to correct course and to evolve. That's how everybody's jobs have been, and I think that is not going to change essentially. And I mean, this is maybe a bit the advocate of the devil. If you hide yourself in your committee groups and say, oh, we cannot make these decisions now because there's these uncertainties around DSpace and DSpace-CRIS, maybe that's true because I don't know your exact requirements, but I mean, if something is really urgent and really important, don't delay these decisions and don't hide behind something like this, because if this is finished, some other uncertainty is going to be around the corner anyway.
Thank you, Bram. Okay, let's move on to the next question then. We as an organization are very interested in a merger. What can we do to support the process? Andrea.
The two working groups need to for the merger are looking to the real strategy to be implemented to make this merger effective. And what you can do is to give direction and give priority. So we are mostly talking about feature from the technical perspective. So which feature are more important for you? Which feature are more urgent for you? Which feature are essential? Which feature do you feel not strictly needed? And what you can accept to put an effort to configure to enable more, and what do you feel necessary to be enabled out of box because it's just what you expect. So eventually you can disable if you don't use it, but you expect that 90% of users need. This kind of information need to be gathered from the community. We cannot decide alone. So this is true for DSpace, this is true for DSpace-CRIS. So from DSpace, we need to hear the most urgent feature that you want to bring from DSpace-CRIS, and the one that you are not sure that are relevant for you. From DSpace-CRIS, tomorrow at workshop, I will ask you to do that. Which feature will prevent you to migrate? If the merge occurs, which feature will say, if this feature is missing in the merged solution, we cannot move from DSpace-CRIS 8 to the merged solution, and so on. This is the kind of question that you should ask, help us to answer it.
Thank you, Andrea.
Just one very short addition. What you always can do is support the DSpace community. Be active, join the DSpace developer meetings. Yes, it's called developer meetings, but sometimes it's helpful if just the repository manager is also sitting in there and giving their opinion about certain features. Or join DCAT. These groups will be involved in the discussion, and these groups are having open meetings, developer meetings weekly, DCAT, if I remember correctly, monthly. And the information is on the wiki. Beate and me, we reported about it, I think, in the DSpace News presentation last year at Praxistreffen. Slides are available, recordings available, or just contact us and ask how you can join these groups. Because they will be involved, and the more people are in these groups, the more these groups can handle for us and can help out with going closer to the merger.
Yeah, I agree with Andrea that giving us your input on what is important to you in the feature set is probably the key piece of information, and also in the timeline of these working groups. This is really now the moment to do these things. I mean, one way of thinking about the categorization of where a specific feature should land, and this is kind of a variation of what Andrea just said, is that there are those features that are in DSpace core that are also enabled by default, and this should really be the core set where the compatibility between all these features that are in the same state should be really rock solid from a performance perspective, from a security perspective, etc. Then a second degree or a second layer could be, some feature could be in the DSpace code base, but it could be disabled by default, and it could require some work when setting it up to enable it by ways of configuration. And then what that would mean is, yeah, maybe in this area of features, it is acceptable for features to be there that are actually not compatible with each other. For example, I mean, it's just a hypothetical thing. Let's say there is something, some feature that is very useful to make DSpace a dark archive, let's say. Maybe if you turn that on, it will be conflicting with some use cases for open access. And maybe that's okay in that area of optional features that can be enabled or disabled. But I also want to highlight there is still a third category, and this third category where a feature can land gives you the benefit of the institution that A, you can do whatever you want, B, you can move the fastest, but C, it does not give any responsibility on the community. And then I'm talking about functionality or features that actually live outside of the DSpace code base. It's not because we're going to merge DSpace and DSpace-CRIS today that suddenly everything you need will be part of DSpace Core in general. And the big advantage that was added into DSpace 7 development was the fact that all of the business logic that we use in the user interface is now also expressed in REST API endpoints. So the whole potential that you have to build things that are not in the DSpace core, but that greatly that could address your requirements is also still there. So I think these three accesses in the core enabled by default, in the core disabled by default, but enabled by configuration, and then other types of development that can still live outside of the DSpace code base. Putting things in the specific buckets is very relevant. And that should maybe not only be considered for things that are in DSpace-CRIS, but maybe we have to think about these things for features that are already in DSpace Core today. Like, for example, the fact that something like Google Analytics or other integrations that they live in the core and that we as a community take on the technical depth to keep supporting them, yeah, maybe for some of these things it's no longer relevant.
Thank you, Bram. Okay, moving on to the next question. Would functionalities of DSpace-CRIS be lost during the merger? Big question. Who would like to answer that? Pascal?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
You should answer. So the answer is your, essentially, is what I said before. The goal is to don't lose anything that is useful, that is general, but we can for sure lose something.
We had the same question with the merger to DSpace 7. And I would like to know who is actually missing the subject tag cloud for browsing that we at the end did skip and did not migrate to DSpace 7 because it felt like being out of time. What I wanted to point out is nobody can answer this question seriously at the current state because we are still planning how is the merger at all happening before we can plan what's getting in. Secondly, yes, we all know for the little features that everybody likes, but then it might come up at the end that we say, this feature feels like being so out of time, we would have deprecated it anyway. And we again, at the answer that I gave before, if everything works out as we hope for, the merger will be, or the migration to a merged code base will be like a migration to a new major release of DSpace and or DSpace-CRIS. New major releases contain new features and might also deprecate or remove existing features. That's happening every time with a major release. Yesterday evening, after the meeting, I sat down with my laptop for 5 minutes to fix one little thing on a pull request, and I'm very hopeful that we will get a new cover page mechanism, for example, for DSpace 9. That this, of course, means that we will deprecate the old one. That's a normal process, and it might not have something to do with a merger of the two code bases. Yes, we have features that are existing in both code bases and are implemented in different ways. And there we will have to take a close look if we can enable both next to each other, and you can decide by configuration, or if we can change one of them in a way that it also supports the features that the other one is, for example, giving. But today, we don't have a list. We have to write the list first, and then we can check, and then we can answer the question.
I wanted to add one point from my user side, and I agree with everything. It's a lot about our community defining what are the points we really need, the requirements, and then whether they are feasible. But especially for those who are using DSpace-CRIS for quite some time, it is extremely difficult to see what are DSpace-CRIS features, whereas DSpace features. So this will be really important, and we do have a lack of documentation with DSpace-CRIS, something we need to address in the process. Everything which should go into DSpace code has to be documented, but we will have a period of, I'd not say disinformation, this is the wrong word, but like identifying what are really the functions, the requirements from the DSpace-CRIS community, which we think should go into the DSpace code, not because our institution needs it for some reason, but because we think DSpace community needs it.
Thank you.
Maybe a comforting idea is, even if something is missed in the first version 0.0 of the merger, if enough people raise it and create GitHub issues about it, very likely something will come back. The DSpace 7 development and 8 and 9, it has a lot of great examples there. For example, collection-based or community-based search, those search boxes, they were not there in 7.0. People found that very important. In the end, they were added again, and there are still features where we are still working on that kind of parity going forward. And the contribution there could be, instead of only raising, hey, bring this feature back, to either maybe develop it yourself, contribute it, or pay a service provider to do that for you. And those are all venues that you can take.
Thank you. Okay, another interesting question. What's the fallback scenario for Force Science if the community decides that the merger is not feasible? Probably a question for Andrea.
It would be nice to answer this question from 1 year from now. It's an hard question, honestly. And tomorrow I will give more detail about the roadmap for DSpace-CRIS, but essentially the next 2 years for DSpace-CRIS will be do all the best to have this merger to occur. And doing that will also start to create, to improve the situation, to keep open different alternatives if the merger does not occur. One of the focus will be on the documentation, as Beate suggests, and for instance, on much more automatic tests. Automatic tests are great because improved stability of the code will help DSpace user, DSpace committer to trust more DSpace-CRIS and to understand more DSpace-CRIS features, so should speed up the merger process. But having improved this aspect would also reduce the burden to keep DSpace-CRIS aligned with future version of DSpace if they should not merge. So I don't have an exact response right now. It could be that we will have to take the decision to really fork the community. We are a fork on GitHub, but we never use this word. And you are the evidence that the community is not forked, because the Praxistreffen Science ever was DSpace and DSpace-CRIS together. And this is the plan. But one scenario, of course, is also, yes, the merger is not occurred. We have some features that are waiting, are starting to wait too much now. And we want to plan for this feature with a strategy, with a vision together. If we can do that with the merger, this will be the best option for us. Otherwise, in 1 year, we need to consider other options.
Actually, this month, there was a slight change in the steering group, and Susanna from Force Science stepped back from the steering group because she's changing her role in the organization, if I might say so. And there was a vote about who's filling the seat for the end of the term. And there was an open vote in the leadership group who's going there. And I'm very happy that Andrea now is part of the DSpace Steering Group, because it shows that the committee understands how important it is to work together and to include Force Science in the strategic discussions and decisions. And it's a sign for me from the committee towards Force Science that we would like to continue to work, as Andrea just said, on planning how we can implement cool new features in both softwares. And I think personally that's also why we are so seriously discussing the merge, because there's a lot of interest on both sides to get this done and happen?
Just to clarify, I answer exactly the specific question. So what will happen to DSpace-CRIS or for science? I'm not talking about what we'll do for science with DSpace. That is no discussion about that. So for science is heavily engaged with the DSpace community, will stay in the DSpace community, whatever will happen. So the support for science for DSpace is a guarantee. But again, what I say has a major benefit is instead to give 1,000 of hour, 2,000 of hour to DSpace and double to DSpace-CRIS, we can put the sum over a single community. This is much better.
Thank you both. Just a note on the time, officially at 10:55, it said we're going to have a coffee pause, but we're going to go a little bit into that coffee pause, another 10 minutes or so. We still have 10 questions, so no pressure on the panelists. But we'll move on to the next one. Is the German-speaking area the only area where there seems to be no clear distinction between a DSpace community and a DSpace-CRIS community? Interesting question. Pascal.
I can't say this for certainty, but every DSpace-CRIS user is using DSpace all over the world. It's part of the software. So again, for me, I see that DSpace-CRIS is not so heavily used in the United States, if I'm not wrong. It's more used in Europe. And for the members of the DSpace governance who are situated in the United States, it might be not so obviously as for us that these both are already one for community for a long time, because they're not so much in contact with DSpace-CRIS users. But out of my perspective, every DSpace-CRIS user is using DSpace and is part of this community. In Germany, we started a huge build-up of the community, and that we're sitting here together with 100 people and doing this every year. That's something pretty unique in the world, yes. But all over the world, DSpace-CRIS users are using DSpace and are part of the community, if you ask me.
Yes, there is no real DSpace-CRIS community outside of DSpace, and this is by intention. So we don't have a different mailing list, we don't have a different Slack channel, we don't have a different wiki, everything is together. So the majority of DSpace-CRIS user identify themselves as DSpace user. And this also make harder to understand where DSpace-CRIS is used. We find from time to time institutions that are running DSpace-CRIS and they don't know that they are running DSpace-CRIS. Because DSpace-CRIS is not only provided by for science, many institutions run by themselves. In some case, IT department just installed the software, but the repository manager is not completely aware if it's DSpace-CRIS or DSpace. In other case, other provider bring DSpace-CRIS to the user without make too explicit if it is DSpace-CRIS or DSpace. And this is true in US, is true in Africa, is true in South America. I'm not sure if we have known installation in Australia, honestly, but in all the other places of the world, we have in DSpace-CRIS installation that are known or unknown to the institution that run DSpace-CRIS.
Thank you both. Next question we've already touched on a little bit. The question is, what happens if there is no merger? Are there already considerations for this? Andrea talked a little bit about the for science perspective. Are there any other thoughts, comments on this?
We are always speaking about the potential merger because no one of us can say, yes, the merger is happening, because we can't decide on our own. My feeling is, for the first time, we have serious discussions that even would like to produce plans about how this merger is going. And that is a large sign from the community what we are all working towards too. And please don't get me wrong, I'm not saying the merger will happen. All I'm saying is that a lot of people in the community are putting resources into making it happen, and it hopefully will come, and we hopefully will decide together for it. But yes, the decision is not made yet.
Thank you. I see a question. I'll come up to you and give you the microphone.
Hello. What would you say is the biggest hurdle, time constraints and roadmaps of the two projects aside that you would face during the merger?
And the biggest hurdle. Would like to answer that? Bram?
I think from a high level perspective is just the biggest hurdle is that I think maybe both on the technical and on the strategic level is that some trade-offs will need to be made, and trade-offs from parties that have different perspective on different things. Maybe not all of it can be just merged as is and will maybe have to be changed or altered. And I think those are, well, we have a history of constructively working together, but sometimes, and some of these trade-offs or some of these decisions in the past have been, very, very, very hard to make, just because there can be so many arguments pro and so many arguments contra. So I think we will be able to make some trade-offs, but I think the biggest hurdle is maybe we get really stuck on some of these aspects.
The amount of work. The amount of work of merging feature by feature or a whole block, the amount of work of reviewing code, the amount of work of enhancing code quality, which both communities would benefit from, the amount of work of documentation, the amount of work to give trainings and to join these trainings, the amount of work to form strategic decisions and a governance that's able to handle. Yes, we are one community, but still giving the decision about the DSpace-CRIS releases as part of DSpace releases to the current governance is adding more work to this for this governance. So really simple, the amount of work.
Thank you both. We have time for only one more question. We have two minutes left, so we'll address that one here. Will major code adaptations be necessary after a merger or of existing DSpace-CRIS systems? So about major code adaptations.
Sorry for pushing forward, but I come back to the answer I gave before. It will be as with every major release you did in the past. If you modified your code locally, it will be work for you, of course. If you have local additions, if you have a local layout, who doesn't? It will be work, as with every other major release in the past. But you knew this before. You knew this at the time where you implemented your local changes.
Thank you.
I just want to add the same careful approach to make simple the migration, as simple as possible, the migration from DSpace to the merged DSpace will be used also for DSpace-CRIS. So if you are on DSpace-CRIS 8, 9, and need to migrate to, assuming that DSpace 10 will be the merged solution, you will have a clear path to migrate from your DSpace-CRIS to the merged solution. And this will incur in all the things that Pascal already said. So it will be similar to what you need to do when you migrate from DSpace-CRIS 7 to DSpace-CRIS 8.
I think also one perspective here is that in the last two editions of the Open Repository Conference, there is this kind of trend or the feeling within the larger community that the software solutions that we're building, that they have all become too complex, too big to maintain, impossible to install, and that people say, oh no, we should start to think about repositories that are just generated as static HTML based on CSV files, to give an example. And that really, I mean, being in the community for so long is really a very painful observation to make as a committer or as a service provider, because none of us intends to make life more complex, more difficult for the people operating it. but just the reality of a web technology on one end, but basically on the other end to say like, yes, more requirements, more use cases, more features, just works hand in hand with that complexity. But from our perspective, going into these groups, it's very important that the installation process for new institutions to come along, the upgrade process, the migration process, if anything adds complexity there, it's gonna be a really, I mean, it's a big discussion, and we really should not go very light of doing anything like that that brings us down that path.
Okay. Well, I know there's still questions. I apologize. We didn't get to all of them, but for the sake of time, we're going to stop here. But please use the time here that we have at the Praxistreffen. Use the coffee breaks, the dinner, to continue to have the conversation, to ask questions. Feel free to approach any of us, any of the panelists here, to ask questions that haven't been answered. Thank you for the questions you entered. Thank you so much to the panelists. A big round of applause to all of them. And Pascal will now just give a brief update on how we will proceed in terms of time.